The 2020 XFL showed a new promise for spring football until COVID ended the league after 5 weeks of play. But in that short period of time, we did see some very memorable quarterback play. We also saw a few other quarterbacks fade into history. Let's look back at the signal callers from XFL 2.0. Taylor Heinicke might be the gold standard in this discussion, even though he never saw the field in the XFL in 2020. Heinicke was the backup to then St. Louis quarterback Jordan Ta'amu after some brief action with the New England Patriots, Houston Texans, and Carolina Panthers before landing in the XFL. Later in 2020, Heinicke signed a practice squad deal with the Washington football team and even threw a touchdown in Week 16 after moving up to the active roster. In 2021, he signed a 2-year, $4.75 million deal with the team. He replaced Ryan Fitzpatrick as the starter when Fitzpatrick suffered a season-ending hip injury in the season opener. Heinicke set an NFL record for completions in a quarterback's first 3 starts and ended up passing for nearly 3,500 yards and 20 touchdowns. In 2022, Heinicke was the backup to Carson Wentz, but started 9 games after Wentz's 372nd injury or something, and he finished the season with more than 1,800 yards passing and 12 touchdowns. Heinicke got his big payday in 2023 when he signed a 2-year, $14 million contract with the Atlanta Falcons, but he only started 4 games that season. In 2024, Heinicke was traded to the LA Chargers. The player Heinicke backed up in the XFL is still a staple in spring football. Jordan Ta'amu signed with the USFL in 2022 after bouncing around in the NFL with Kansas City twice, Detroit twice, even a brief stop in Washington in 2021 where he was rejoined with Heinicke, and then he had a 5-day stay in Carolina. Ta'amu led the Tampa Bay Bandits in 2022, and he led the league in passing with more than 2,000 yards and 14 touchdowns. He joined the XFL's DC Defenders the next year, leading them to a runner-up finish in 2023, and then he had a shot with the Minnesota Vikings after winning the XFL Offensive MVP. The NFL opportunity failed to come to fruition, so Ta'amu was back with the DC Defenders in the newly formed UFL, but that team struggled to a 4-6 record in 2024. P.J. Walker was on again, off again with the Indianapolis Colts before he found his way back to the NFL after his abbreviated stint with the Houston Roughnecks in 2020. Walker threw 4 touchdowns in the XFL opener against the LA Wildcats. In his 5 games, a 5-0 record by the way, he led the league in passing yards and passing touchdowns. Later in 2020, Walker signed a $1.5 million deal with Carolina, where over 3 seasons he played mostly as a backup and threw for a combined 1,400 yards and 5 touchdowns. Walker was later signed to the Cleveland Browns practice squad. He started 2 games in 2023. Walker was with the Seattle Seahawks in 2024, but he was cut in August. Cardale Jones didn't go to Ohio State to play school, but he did play 11 games and won a championship, which was enough to get him drafted in the 4th round by the Buffalo Bills in 2016. A brief stay in Buffalo was followed by a stint with the LA Chargers and Seahawks before the XFL came calling. Jones started all 5 games with the DC Defenders in 2020, throwing for 674 yards and 4 touchdowns. Jones returned to pro football in 2022 with a 2-week stay with the CFL's Edmonton Elks. Then he signed with the Indoor Football League's Massachusetts Pirates, but reportedly refused to show up for practice and was released. Jones now works for an NIL agency for college athletes. New York Guardians quarterback Matt McGloin saw his pro career end when the XFL was shut down. McGloin was with the Oakland Raiders from 2013 until 2016, then with the Eagles, Texans, and Chiefs before landing in the XFL. His time with the Guardians was far from pleasant. He suffered a rib injury that cost him his job and reportedly feuded with the coaching staff. But McGloin did say he appreciated the experience and he found a whole new line of work after football.
Lackawanna County has always been my home.
McGloin is now on the Lackawanna County Board of Commissioners in Pennsylvania. The King of Spring, Luis Perez, replaced McGloin as the starter that season, starting only a couple of games, but his career was far from over. Perez threw the first touchdown of the new USFL in 2022, and he threw for exactly 1,200 yards and 9 touchdowns with just 1 interception. Then he headed to the XFL in 2023, where he was able to escape the disaster that was the Vegas Vipers and then joined the Arlington Renegades, leading them to the 2023 XFL Championship. Perez had his best statistical season in 2024 in the UFL with 2,300 yards passing for a 3-7 Renegades team. Perez was in camp with the LA Chargers, but he was one of the final cuts before the 2024 deadline. A lot of people thought Landry Jones would be the face of the league when he was allocated to the Dallas Renegades and reuniting with his college coach Bob Stoops. Jones was with the Pittsburgh Steelers from 2013 until 2018, spent a couple of weeks with the Jaguars and Raiders before heading to the XFL. Jones suffered a knee injury in camp but played his first XFL game in Week 2. In his 4 games, he passed for nearly 800 yards and 5 touchdowns. He hung up the pro cleats after the end of that XFL, and he went on to own a training facility in Dallas. Brandon Silver started 4 games for the Seattle Dragons in 2020, throwing for 539 yards and 6 touchdowns in his second spring football stop. He had played for the Memphis Express in 2019 in the AAF, and in 2021 he made a third spring football stop to play in the Spring League with the Conquerors. Silvers was back in the XFL in 2023, throwing for over 1,500 yards with the Houston Roughnecks, and in 2024, Silvers was the backup to A.J. McCarron with the St. Louis Battlehawks. Aaron Murray was allocated to the Tampa Bay Vipers after NFL stops with Kansas City, Arizona, Philadelphia, and the LA Rams. He was the backup to Matt Sims with the AAF's Atlanta Legends in 2019 and led them to their first win in that league. A foot injury limited his time with the Vipers in 2020, and he left pro football after the season ended. Murray is now a TV analyst for college football. You can't spell journeyman without Josh Johnson. Kinda. The 2020 LA Wildcats quarterback had 16 different stops in pro football before coming to the XFL. He was one of the top quarterbacks in just 4 games in the XFL, and his journey was not finished. Johnson signed with the Niners for a 3rd time in his career in 2020. The New York Jets in 2021, the 2nd time he had been on that team. The Baltimore Ravens later in 2021, his 2nd time there. The Denver Broncos in 2022. A 4th time with San Francisco later that year. And then in 2023, his 3rd stint with the Baltimore Ravens, where he is now. Tyree Jackson was a backup to Cardell Jones in D.C. in 2020, but transformed his game to play tight end for the Eagles and Giants in the NFL. The Giants released Jackson with an injury settlement because of back issues back in August. Tampa Bay Vipers quarterback Taylor Cornelius went 1-3 with the Vipers and later played 3 seasons in the CFL with Edmonton. He was cut by the Elks in January. Those are just a few of the quarterbacks from the XFL in 2020 you might remember, or you might not. For a look at some of the potential quarterbacks in the UFL from the recent draft, check out this video. And if you really want a deep dive into the potential UFL quarterbacks, check out my conversation with Pat Ruffino right here on his channel, Analyze and Educate. Thanks for watching, and please like and subscribe.